I feel like I'm trapped in a John Green novel. Who did I piss off to put this book in my path? The worst people I have ever. Greetings from Japan. I cannot believe that I'm filming this intro literally from Japan. I am on a trip, the trip of my lifetime, with Gavin of How to Train Your Gavin. He is hosting it. Gabby of Gabby Reads is here, and honestly every single person on the trip is amazing. So currently in the middle of filming a vlog for that, and I just can't wait for it to go live. I'm incredibly excited to announce my new series here on Jesse on YouTube, where I pick a book that has been deemed problematic and I read it in detail. I analyze it for myself, I look at all of the themes, I look at the criticisms, I formulate my own thoughts, and then I will go ahead and go through like the 1-star review. So the book that I am going to be featuring in this video is none other than Big Swiss. So this is a very highly anticipated book, especially over on Bookstagram, but I hadn't really seen a whole lot of hype for it on BookTube. So I figured, okay, let's talk about this controversial book over on Instagram and bring it over into the BookTube community and see how people are thinking about it. Bookstagram versus BookTube tends to read very different books, and this one has a lot of buzz around it. It recently scored an adaptation with HBO, so it is getting a TV series. This book has been really heavily criticized for racism in particular, but many other things as well. Big Swiss follows a gynecologist who has never had an orgasm. She begins seeing a very unconventional sex therapist, and the transcriptionist that the sex therapist hires to transcribe their sessions falls in love with the gynecologist. She's from Switzerland. So the transcriber calls her Big Swiss, and she ends up meeting Big Swiss accidentally out in the wild and decides to use the information that Big Swiss has confessed in her sessions in order to make Big Swiss fall in love with her, and they start dating. Fun, raunchy, riotous, raucous, all of that fun stuff. Everybody on Bookstagram is really swooning about it, very much loving it, but there's also been a lot of criticism. So welcome to the start of my new series. I'm really excited about it. And without further delay, let's get into the video. What is up, internet? It is, what day is it? The 20th of August, maybe the 21st. What is the 21st? The 21st. And Akasha, leave the coffee alone. There is more rum chata than coffee in this coffee, and she knows. Akasha, who's your girl? Who's your girl? You want the coffee? Come here. Just kidding, you're a dog. Anyway, we just finished episode 1 of One of Us is Lying. It's a watch party that we're doing with our patrons. It's the first ever time that we're watching a TV show together. So we are all cozy on StreamYard right now with our snacks and stuff. We finished episode 1, so much better than we expected. Best of Pretty Little Liars, Gossip Girl vibes, with some delicious substance like blackness, black queerness, class issues. Like, we're thriving. Café con heavy cream and grenadine, and then we just added some rum chata because our abuelita raised us well. So we are going to start episode 2. Also say hello to the patrons. The beautiful, the brave, the Patreon. We will update y'all later. Later. Is there any, and I do mean any, sense that can be made from reading this book? Reading update for Big Swiss. I do not enjoy the direction that this book is heading. It is the equivalent of driving in a cartoon. You're driving and then all of a sudden the road ends and you're going off of a cliff. You know those scenes in cartoons where all of a sudden you're in free air and you're just falling? That's what happened to this book. It was so good. It was so good, and then it has turned into a soap opera. I feel like I'm watching a telenovela and I'm not happy about it. This exploration has been demoted to banal relationship counseling and character dynamics that feel very high school. The politics between these characters all feel very high school, and I simply cannot tolerate it. We started the book with this important study of this woman who like can't have orgasms despite being a gynecologist, which is a very fascinating premise. And one of the things that myself and so many people were excited about this book was I hate English so much, and I hate this book even more. One of the things that we were all so geeked about was the depiction of sex therapy, and that has just gone with the wind. Oh my god, it's so frustrating. Basically, Big Swiss has her orgasm. And now she's just having regular orgasms so easily. Her doctor is like, here, get a vibrator. She gets a vibrator and now she can orgasm no problem at all. Now she has them all the time. We haven't spoken about that at all. We haven't talked about why she was having difficulty. We haven't talked about if there was anything mental, any component. We didn't talk about therapeutic techniques that could help with women who are struggling with this issue. Now all that they do in their therapy sessions, and therapy sessions are a big part of the book, is simply just discuss her marriage and the way that her husband doesn't make her happy. And I'm just like,
this is not what I signed up for.
And then there is another relationship, which I'm not buying the other relationship that has sprung up in this book, and I'm not gonna spoil it for anybody. But that relationship is the most unplausible, unrealistic thing that I've ever heard. I do not buy it for a single second. It feels very out of character for Big Swiss, and I'm just not enjoying it. I'm not enjoying it at all. I do not like green eggs and ham. I do not like them. Sam, I am. I just cannot believe that the entire novel is about how she can't have orgasms, and then she has one and all of a sudden she has them all the time like it's tea and crumpets. The therapist doesn't even ask what changed. And also, Big Swiss is just basically a manic pixie dream girl. Our other female protagonist, the one who's actually narrating the story, her name is Greta, right? I've just realized that Big Swiss is Greta's manic pixie dream girl, because her focus, the whole point of her in this book, is to inspire the other main character. And it's just, it doesn't make any sense. I feel like I'm trapped in a John Green novel, and I don't like it one bit. Now, all of that being said, in terms of things that are in the text that are problematic, I can officially say that the representation of trauma and therapy is just very, very inaccurate, which is weird given that this book is about therapy. The anti-trauma addressing in the book is very, very confusing and disturbing, and I'm gonna give you an example. One of the things that keeps coming up in the book is how you can't lean on your trauma like a crutch. And this is something that Big Swiss believes very, very heavily. But now that perspective seems to be bleeding into other characters. Now, there's nothing wrong with having one character, or even two, that's like, yeah, I think people overinflate their trauma and lean on their trauma and blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. But it seems that everyone in the novel is reinforcing this idea that your trauma is something that you can just quickly move past and get over. And if you don't do that, then you are abusing your own trauma and wallowing in your own guilt and self-pity and not letting go of the past. That is addressed in a single sentence by the psychotherapist and then never talked about again. And that makes sense because his role in therapy is not to kind of fix the way that she views trauma, but rather just address the things that they are talking about in their sessions. It is making me uncomfortable, but also especially because all of these characters are white, right? And so what does it mean to have a wealthy, affluent, white main character who is very, very beautiful, shockingly beautiful? What does it mean for her to have this belief that trauma is just something you can snap out of? What does it mean to have this woman kind of, or both of the white protagonists, what does it mean for Greta and Big Swiss to both have this attitude of y'all should just get over it, don't lean on it, that kind of thing? Because especially if you are marginalized and have multiple marginalization, what does that mean for you? Long story short, I don't
think that I'm being coherent.
The depiction of trauma and the discussions about how millennials talk about trauma is very shaming. It is very holier than thou, very outdated, and it seems like the two of them think that they are superior for holding this belief that they have. It's just very bizarre. And again, if you are one of those people that like to see ideologies like that challenged within the text, then you are going to be very irritated about this book. And I'm not so much irritated. I'm not,
how do I put this?
I already don't have respect for these characters. So the way that these characters look at trauma doesn't mean anything to me. It does not affect me or bother me at all, especially because these are both white women, one of whom is very, very rich. So white women just running around telling people to get over their trauma, that really just doesn't mean anything to me. You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean for indigenous people? What does that mean for black people? What does that mean for disabled people? What does that mean for people who have trauma and will continue to experience it daily through absolutely no fault of their own, but because they are hyper-racialized, hyper-marginalized in society? You know what we're saying? So honestly, it's unsurprising that these two white women hold this belief and think that they are superior and helping the world by kind of being callous and being turned off when people up front discuss their trauma and talk about the ways that they know their trauma informs their life. Yes, the depiction of sex therapy and female orgasms and all that shit is just trash. I'm really confused with the writer, and I'm so excited to read the 1-star reviews and author interviews at the end of this little experiment, because my God. Those were all of my thoughts as of yesterday, okay? I am going to walk the dog, clean, do all my stuff, and update y'all later. I'm gonna be continuing to listen to the audiobook, which is phenomenal. It really, really is. There's a full cast, it's great. I love the narrator for Big Swiss. Amazing, and I'm going to update y'all in a little bit.
A little bit.
I just want to know what I did to deserve this book. Who did I piss off to put this book in my path? Why can't I have nice things? Why can't I just be excited about something? These characters are the worst people I have ever freaking read, and I've read some horrible people, but Big Swiss and Greta, they deserve each other because they are horrible creatures.
Horrible, horrible, horrible.
I cannot. So first of all, Greta is, this is gonna be a small spoiler. Actually, let me see if this is in the synopsis of the book, because y'all know that I don't read synopsis. I just want to see, not this getting an adaptation, of course it is. So this is on the synopsis. Basically, Big Swiss and Greta begin to have an affair. Greta lies about her name, lies about exactly what she does, and ends up meeting Big Swiss at a dog park. They go out for drinks and then they start sleeping together. First of all, I don't buy that for a fucking second. I don't buy the fact that they would be hooking up for a second. But they have this 6-month-long relationship at this point in the book. Big Swiss finally figures out what's going on, figures out that Greta is the transcriptionist for her sessions and has been lying, manipulating her, using information that she learned in her session to make Big Swiss fall in love with her, that sort of thing. Disgusting behavior. That already is disgusting. But when Big Swiss calls Greta out for this and is understandably hurt, feels exploited, etc., Greta goes,
"Well, you're cheating on your husband, so you aren't perfect either."
What? That is peak narcissistic behavior. And I know because I've dated a narcissist.
Unfortunately.
A hallmark of narcissism is trying to use something. When you bring up something, they try and bring up something else so that you now are no longer talking about what you were trying to address in the first place. They try intentionally to convolute the narrative. They attempt to shame you so thoroughly that you cannot remember what you wanted to address with them in the first place. And you don't feel that you have the right to address it because they have psychologically dominated you. And that is just one of the most abusive, violent things that you can do to somebody else's brain, is to make them feel small in their own head, especially when you know damn well you have done something wrong. It is the most disgusting, willful type of manipulation, and that paired with the fact that she preyed on her in the first place is disgusting. Big Swiss cannot actually consent to sex with Greta because Greta has this massive upper hand and has literally been stalking her. So there's sexual violence in that as well. It's just absolutely disgusting, so I hate that. She starts shaming Big Swiss for all of these other things. And
you're relying on your trauma too, because everybody knows what happened to you and they inherently treat you differently because of it.
Because Big Swiss survived a physical attack of violence. Just watching this woman try and manipulate and talk her way out of the horrible thing that she did to this other woman really sickened me. Besides the fact that I'm already not a fan of Big Swiss, but she is a really interesting character. Greta though, Greta does not interest me at all. And what I don't love is that now, all of a sudden in the book, Greta is talking about how her period makes her crazy. And this is an actual thing. I always forget the term for this disorder because it's very lengthy, but it is a disorder that affects, I forget the percentage of period havers, that causes just very, very, very intense mood swings and pain and agony while you're having your period. And it's like, This is not going to be used as an excuse for what you have done. And if that is going to kind of be the reason for why Greta has done this to Big Swiss, then that needs to be discussed medically within the text. You don't just get to, as a writer, be like, yeah, this character's period is out of whack and that's why they behave this way. That doesn't make any fucking sense. Why is this being introduced an hour before the book is ended? The book is all over the place. And then we're at this point where Big Swiss asks Greta a question and Greta turns around and punches her. If you watched my most recent video that I did on problematic books, you will know that potentially my biggest pet peeve is people punching their partners, slapping, kicking, hitting their partners, and that being seen as comic relief or not a big deal. That was something that happened. Colin Barron's You're Not Supposed to Die Tonight. There is a scene right at the beginning where this girl walks up to her boyfriend and slaps him across the face, and it's kind of seen as a joke, and it's not fucking funny. It wasn't funny in that book, and it's not funny in this one. And this one, at least this wasn't depicted as comic relief. It was not at all seen as an issue, not a big deal, not a disgusting thing to do. Violence in female-female relationships is definitely glossed over or not seen as a big deal. It's the same thing with male-male relationships. This theme is talked about heavily in Carmen Maria Machado's In the Dream House, which is about a nonfiction memoir of Carmen's very abusive relationship with another woman. And it meant a lot to me because it finally talked about queer abusive relationships and how it's just not taken seriously. So to see how it's not taken seriously in this book, which already has so many problems, I just find it repugnant, honestly. I have so many questions about the author. I've got a lot of questions about, is the author queer? How does the author feel about therapy? How does the author feel about millennials and how millennials look at their own trauma? I have questions. I'm curious about it. So I'm really excited to kind of dig in and look at the things that the author has said outside of this book personally. And that all of that being said,
I'm just curious
because there's so many layers to this. The author could be queer but just not out about it, or just doesn't talk about her own queerness. I don't like to speculate about people's identities because I think that that gets dangerous very quickly. But I am curious about what this author has said, how she does identify, if she has shared anything about her identities, that kind of thing. I don't know, but I'm gonna finish this book. It is really, really frustrating me. At this point, like, I just wanna be done. I just wanna be fucking done. What is up, cuties? We are descending into the darkness because a friend is coming over. In 10 minutes, we are gonna be watching One of Us is Lying. Oh my God, I keep messing up. I'm excited because we have been watching One of Us is Lying with our patrons. We got up to episode 3 and it's so good. We're all loving it. We are currently in the process of planning the next watch party for episodes 4 through 6, and that's all we can think about. But in about 10 minutes, we are having our live party for the month, and we're really excited because we have a bunch of new patrons, so we're excited to be live with them and like get to meet them and all of that fun stuff. We are currently editing the Patreon exclusive video for August, which is how has BookTube changed my reading tastes over the years that I've been on this platform. It's just been so good looking back and analyzing my reading tastes and all of that fun stuff, and how those have been shaped as a result of the booktubers that I've encountered and the experiences that I've had on BookTube and the discussions that other booktubers have had that influence my reading. You know what I mean? I'm just a nostalgic ass queen. I am excited that I'm doing this. Sorry, I'm like trying to find all my beauty products because the face needs to, I gotta do my daytime skincare routine. This is our outfit of the day. It's called Sweat. I'm going to be listening to the audiobook for Big Swiss. I'm so close to being done, thank God. And I will update you guys when I finish the book later today.
My cousin watched me weep. I love everything. Fire spreading all around my room. My world's so bright, it's hard to breathe, but
What's up, degenerates? We have officially completed Big Swiss against our better judgment, and we officially know what the rating is going to be. But before giving the rating and really solidifying that rating in our little brain. I wanted to read some 1-star reviews from the computer. I have pulled up a bunch of reviews so that we can hear about more of the criticisms, and also then I want to read at least one interview with the author, and then I'm gonna tell y'all my final reading. Let's just get started with this first review. Is from Janelle on Goodreads. Why does Jean Began hate Asian people? From the novel's outset, literally in the first chapter, Began includes casually racist comments about ghost slaves and Japanesey bees, while also making glib jokes about anorexia and suicide. I kept reading even though these comments made me deeply uncomfortable. At the 82% mark, an incredibly racist comment is made, making me DNF the book. Greta compares her swollen face and eyes to turning Chinese. Like, what the actual fuck? There is very fine line between satire and ridicule, and we need to be vigilant about media that leans in the wrong direction. I know that Greta is not meant to be a likable character, but I strongly believe that you can create an unlikable protagonist without including language that reinforces negative stereotypes or blatantly offensive opinions. Racism, ableism, homophobia. Too often we excuse this type of character simply because they are unhinged, and that is not acceptable.
Love this person.
I understand the use of satire as a form of criticism, but in Big Swiss, the hateful commentary just sits there and goes unchecked. Satire without criticism equals hate speech. Greta's racism does not qualify as satire because it's never criticized or made part of the plot. The casual racist marks peppered throughout the novel lend the reader to believe that this is just the nature of the author, who unsurprisingly also gives off strong boomer Karen vibes with how much she likes to drag you millennials. I'm really disappointed I haven't been hearing more people discuss the casual racism in this novel. I guess I shouldn't be surprised though, because how often microaggressive comments can go over one's head, especially if you've never had to experience them before. That is a really good point. But we need to hold authors, editors, and publishers accountable to be better, do better, employ sensitivity readers, so that we don't have to continue to spread massive aggressive commentary. I hope that HBO adaptation does better. It doesn't make jokes about people's identities or things as sensitive as eating disorders or suicide like Began does in this novel. I hear Otessa Moshfei's books are equally as racist, fatphobic, homophobic, problematic, so I guess I've learned my lesson to stay away from stories of unhinged characters by white women. We have another review from Ashes. I knew I was DNFing after I got to the above line in the very first chapter. There's this weird trend in lit fic of making comments like this to achieve the veneer of irreverency, when in fact they are so overwrought as to feel embarrassing, like when someone calls themselves a centrist because both sides are crazy. Don't worry, I'm not like those social justice warriors who get offended at everything, or those comedians who don't get why that rape joke is bad. I am normal. The only purpose of these jokes is to prove desperately the ability and intention to make them one's audience, and I think that that's cringe, sorry. While I'm not one for naming big themes in this context, a simple meta-epistolary romance between two terrible women is more than enough for me. I do think that the questions of power and deception can be raised well here. I love that Greta is so obsessive about Big Swiss that there is simultaneously horrible and completely understandable. If you could listen in on all your partner's conversations about you, well, would you?
Absolutely not. That sounds awful.
That's the central question of the novel, and one that can be reasonably answered with yes, I would, because I am in the throes of manic, disgusting, obsessive early love. What happened to your face? You look like you've been beaten up. Your eyes are almost swollen shut. Greta shrugged. You should have seen me out there. I turned Italian, I turned Chinese, and then I started menopause. I was screaming, sobbing, bleeding all over the place. I almost missed this one because I was sure I had read it wrong. Like, surely the author didn't just compare a swollen face to turning Chinese. After several reads through the reviews, I think I was far too charitable. Holy fuck, I literally can't even believe it. To the end, I've got to head off the difficult characters as excuse at the pass. I love difficult characters. I don't even mind difficult characters whose difficulty includes racism, as evidenced by my detransition baby review. This book doesn't feel like one that understands utilizing that racism though, as any kind of broader point beyond our main character is cringe, and it just feels bland. It does not make your main character special to make them overtly racist instead of just covertly racist like everything else in the lit fic lineup. I'm not sure what this racism is supposed to accomplish, and I honestly don't know that the author is either. There's a difference between the evils of generic obsession and the evils of racism. Moshfegh is brought up again as doing similar things in her work, which I've heard a lot of criticism about that. Numerous times I thought this is not about my community. One of the most frustrating elements of this book is its total ignorance as to the basic functionings of the LGBTQ community. There are few precious not bushes, Freudian slip. There are few precious butches, all in flashback, and no trans women. Literally the only mention, honestly, thank God there were no trans women in this novel. Can you imagine what the author would have done to a trans woman in this story?
It is, oh my God.
Like, I just had a physical reaction to the idea of a trans woman being brought into the story and how horribly her character would have been written, used, abused. Like, God, just the idea makes me sick. Oh my God, I felt that in my stomach. Literally the only mention of anything transgender is the following quote. Not that Greta's dog was a bully. He was just an alpha born in the wrong body. He had what Greta called transbreed dysmorphia of the soul and believed himself to be a young wolf trapped in the body of a terrier with worn down teeth. Numerous times I thought, this is not about my community. Not just that it's not about people I know or the spaces I'm in. Literally, it's not about the queer community. This author is so detached from reality, she might as well live on Mars. Flowering dogwood trees are bisexual, Big Swiss said, like us. You're joking, right? Their flowers have both stamens and carpels, or male and female reproductive organs, Big Swiss said. They're called perfect flowers. Listen, letting an older lady fuck you doesn't make you bisexual, Greta said, or perfect. You're just bored.
Fuck.
Numerous times we do the is it gay if you only kissed a few women but fucked some men also thing. I thought we grew out of in, I don't know, 2000. It's true that so many people struggle coming out as bisexual, but this book is so profoundly opposed to using that word or concept to describe its characters that it rankles me to see people describing it as having bi rep. I'm disappointed to see HBO's making a TV show out of this, but not surprised. All white cast, no butches, no trans women, sign majority America up. Let's do this whole lesbian thing. I should know better than to read popular queer lit fic. It's pretty much most insufferable take on queer identity for 300 pages every single time. I was excited to read this one after seeing so much hype all over Bookstagram. The premise excited me. The protagonist Greta works in transcribing sessions for a sex therapist in her small town, and she gets in to listen into all these juicy conversations. The book focuses a lot on trauma, both the way we carry our own and the way we perceive others', how it shapes our lives. I also enjoyed the queerness, especially with Greta at age 45 being older, that is typically found in popular queer fiction. Throughout the book, there were a few casual racist comments said by Greta. I'm not sure if the author put these in to further portray her as unlikable, but I could not look past the fact that they weren't challenged or questioned. I also think it's not very hard to create an unlikable character without resorting to blatant racism. There were other unnecessarily provocative language used around anorexia and sexuality that made me feel uneasy too. I know that is being turned into a TV series with Jodie Comer as Flavia / Big Swiss, which I'm excited for.
I am not.
Now we have a review by Mina. Jan and Things on her Insta wrote her review, and what I have included here is all from her, but I just summarized it. She did an amazing job describing Began's bigotry and is definitely worth a share. Racist remarks hidden under the guise of satire. I'm not sure why those who read this are failing to note all the horrible ways she mocked Black and Asian people. We actually missed the Black mockery.
So we love that for us.
From the first chapter, Began uses comments such as ghost slaves and Japanese bees, and later on compares her swollen face and eyes to turning Chinese. Makes jokes about anorexia and suicide. Greta's racism is never made to be a main character flaw. Greta is not being written to be a racist character. Began just uses Greta to make racist comments throughout her novel. Let me clarify. Huge difference in using satire to make a point and using comments to put someone's identity at the butt of a joke. I don't recommend this book. I made sure to return mine and not support the author. Now the final review that we're going to read is by Lou Grimberg. Big Swiss is a genuinely enjoyable read. It's transgressive, off the wall, and you're never bored. Why am I reading this? Now I think it is time for us to look up an interview. Okay, so this interview that I scrolled through with timesunion.com did not dig into any of the actual content of the novel. They asked a lot about how the author does live in Hudson, which is where the story takes place, the gentrification of Hudson, what coffee shops the author writes out, of how just very, very kind of generic things versus kind of digging into the novel. So we're gonna try another one. Maybe this is worth going into. Without giving too much away, can you explain why Greta is so compelled by Big Swiss? I hesitate to bring this up because I worry I'll sound like I'm in a cult, but are you familiar with the Enneagram? Really, we're comparing the Enneagrams to cults now? It's supposedly a pretty ancient system of personality typing. I first learned about it in my 20s. Anyway, Big Swiss is a type 8, aka the challenger. They have giant auras, they're charismatic, opinionated, willful, terrified of weakness. Greta, on the other hand, is a type 2, the giver, which is the opposite of type 8. On average, they're so busy helping others, they are completely out of touch with their own needs and desires. Selfless, tireless, altruistic, will do anything for you. That doesn't even describe Greta though. Like, Greta sucks. Okay, so that also didn't get into like any of the criticisms. We're gonna try 2 more interviews because I want to hear this author saying something really of substance about the work, the way that she portrayed trauma, like her thoughts behind that. And I think it's really interesting that these things almost very willfully seem to not be discussed on her part. This book is giving a 1 star. And honestly, those reviews that I read quite summarized why this book didn't work for me. This is her 3rd work. She's 47. She has access to the internet. She clearly knows about queerness, about race, is aware of millennial conversations of trauma, etc. So we don't get to call her ignorant. She knew how she was depicting Black and Chinese people. That wasn't an accident. Writing phrases like Japanesey, comparing a swollen face to a brown person's face.
Those were not accidents.
That's not ignorance. That was like willful decision making and a choice to present these things as quirky. It feels very much that sexual transcription, sex therapy was just used as a quirky selling point for the novel without any love being given into sexual therapy. The therapist himself was a joke. The therapy that he was providing was a joke. This book easily could have been one that talked about female sexual health and pleasure, even just a little bit. It was put in a prime position to do that and even perpetuated the idea through the marketing that that's what it did.
But it didn't.
Instead, it was a book where sex therapy was seen as something to be mocked, something that wasn't useful. The psychotherapist himself was a joke, and everything about the therapeutic process was a joke, especially when you look at the way that Big Swiss's orgasm was handled. She had it, and then we completely moved on from that topic.
Which was the driving factor of the novel.
The abuse, many of the elements of abuse between Big Swiss and Greta were never spoken about. It just summarizes the way that all the problematic things about this novel were in no way challenged or provided discourse about. And if you are intentionally putting these things in your novel to create discourse, what does it mean that even you, the author, decided not to have it? You can't just then expect like the readers to have it and then the readers to give you the benefit of the doubt, and for the reader to do all of the work of the discourse, while you yourself did none of that on the actual text. So then what happens is that white authors then get pat on the back for providing all of this discourse and challenging conversations that they didn't actually write in the novel. I don't like that. It's uncomfortable. Whether or not Jen is queer, the queer representation was harmful. Point blank. And that's the other thing too, like that's why Own Voices isn't always like the best thing, because it doesn't often talk about the way that people within a marginalized group can still have harmful positions of other people within their marginalized group. So I'm always going to pick up stories from somebody writing within their marginalized peer group, but I am also always going to go into every single one of those stories knowing that this is one person from one community's experience, and that through reading them, I don't get the experience of everybody else in the community. The bisexual depiction, the hitting of Greta, the abuse or the hitting of Big Swiss, the stalking, the abuse, just everything. The racist comments, the messiness of the plot, the complete lack of focus on the book. The book was all over the place. We had one line about how Greta's period might be making her crazy, and then that wasn't discussed at all later on in the book. There was a scene where Greta is hemorrhaging. Big Swiss, who is a doctor, is like, you're hemorrhaging. And then something else happens and she doesn't go to the hospital, the hemorrhaging isn't brought up ever again, and she just stops hemorrhaging, and now we're talking about something else. Clip ended because my memory card became full, even more full of shit than this author is. What do y'all do to combat your nausea? Because I have been nauseous all day. I'm trying water with electrolytes. What do y'all do? Ultimately, I do not feel that Big Swiss accomplished any of the things it was trying to do, with the exception of two things. One, it was entertaining, and two, the characters were quirky. But in terms of exploring female-female relationships, the politics of pleasure, unpacking trauma, and seeing all of the ways that it has shaped us, while also offering questions of how do we move forward, none of those things were executed well or honestly at all. I think that a lot of people are going to excuse Greta and Big Swiss's behavior because they are supposed to be unlikable characters. But the thing is, they aren't exactly characters. Their character building was wildly inconsistent, and often the things about their character that were previously established would then be radically changed by the next chapter. There was absolutely no consistency to these characters. It felt that the author had taken quirky qualities from various famous actresses and characters and just decided to split those qualities between the two of them. The way that Big Swiss is a fiercely independent person and doesn't like weakness, but somehow falls for Greta and then considers ending her marriage over Greta, while also frequently talking about how she pities Greta, looks down on her, and low-key despises her. So then we are expected to believe that she plausibly was willing to run off into the sunset with this woman at one point. I think the character work was terrible, and I wish Jen hadn't relied on racist stereotypes in order to provide her character work, because if she had put actual care into building characters that weren't quirky and low-key racist, she could have made something absolutely great, but she chose not to. As y'all can probably guess, Big Swiss is getting a whopping 1 out of 5 stars for me. Comment down below with books that have been deemed problematic or criticized that you're interested in me seeing and analyzing in this series. I'm really excited about this series because, like I said at the start, I love having difficult conversations about literature, and I love getting to analyze literature. Personally, I don't know what the next book that I'm gonna do in this series is, especially if you watched my problematic books on my TBR video that I did. I just filmed that fairly recently, and the books that I depicted in that video are Verity, Taylor Jenkins Reid's Carrie Soto is Back, The Reunion by Kit Frick, Josh Mallerman's books, Sedating Elaine, and then there's also True Biz by Sarah Novick, whose name I know I'm pronouncing wrong, and then there were some other books too. So out of these books, which would you like me to read and analyze next for this series, or if there are any other books, please let me know. Ideally newer releases, but I'm open to an older release as well. If you want more content from me, check out my Patreon, because I make incredibly fun exclusive content for them and them only, and the heart patron level patrons get excerpts to my 2 upcoming novels. But all my social media links are down below if you want to stalk me anywhere else. Stay safe, be good to yourselves, be good to others. Don't write books like this, and I will see you in my next one.